Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Okay.
mhm,
The man, the woman, the positive, the negative. But negative don't mean bad. All
mhm,
right.
mhm,
They mean opposite. Like the
mhm,
Ben tried to tell us about these laws of opposites, the
mhm,
laws of cause and effect. That's
mhm,
what makes the world go round.
mhm,
The man and the woman represents that concept in nature of cause and effect. Okay. And in order for life to continue, they have to replicate themselves. And the
mhm,
way they replicate themselves is the reproduction of themselves as their child. When you give birth to a child, you give birth to yourself. And walk that backwards because people don't really get it.
mhm,
When you give birth to a child, you give birth to aspects of yourself. So you can have 10 children, they'll have 10 different personalities, but every one will have an aspect of your mama and an aspect of your daddy. And that's all you are, except if you go backwards and realize that you're an aspect of your grandparents, your great parents, your great parents, and you go back to the very beginning to the first human being, then you're an aspect of the first woman ever. And then if you go back one more step, like that woman, you're an aspect of God itself. You are a replica of the thing you call God, which is the totality of the universe itself. And you remember when we think of universe, the white man has taught us to look at something beginning. He calls it alpha and omega. And people be up in the pulpit talking about alpha and omega. Alpha and omega is a bogus term because you can't have a beginning. There is no logic that can show you that there is such a thing called a beginning. And if you can't have a beginning, then you can't have its opposite, which you call an ending. So if you have life, then how can you have death? An old man, Uncle Lucius, once told us that life is forever living and death is forever dying. All right.
mhm,
To
mhm,
really understand what he's saying, if when you give birth to your child, you give birth to yourself. And that can go on for a million years of generations of generation of generation. Then is it not you that have lived that million years in other presentations of yourself?
mhm, mhm.
Think about it now. I want you to think on it, Rich. Don't just be getting kind of mesmerized by some slick talking shit I'm saying, right?
Not at all, Professor.
Think of it.
Go ahead.
If when you and your mate,
Mhm,
when you and your female mate
mhm. Yes,
give
sir.
birth to yourself,
Mhm,
when we give birth to a child, you give birth to yourself.
mhm,
So your eternity is already beginning. And
mhm,
you were the eternity of your parents and your grandparents and your great parents and your great great parents, because you are the culmination of all of them. And when you recreate yourself into your child, it becomes the culmination of you and all of the yous in that bloodline cell cluster that has ever lived. It is the same person just a million years later.
Hey, Professor, when my son was first born, one of the first things I told my girl I told her, I said, "Damn, now I've read about reincarnation so much. Now I knows what it feels like." When I looked at my son, I felt that was me again, and I'm like, I could live on like for another, through him. Like even if
That
this
is
vessel
you.
lives.
That
Yeah, so
is
I
you.
felt it. I felt it. I really felt it when I finally had a child. Before I just read it in a book. But when you have the child, you feel it. And you're like, oh shit, reincarnation, this is real. So I know what you're talking about.
No, I want you to see that deeper than that because that's what the world is all about.
Hmm.
And the reason we're in confusion is because they don't have this discussion.
Hmm.
You see, because if this was the discussion, all the other confusions wouldn't have to be discussed.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about the Trinity, and we go back to ancient Kemet, and we're talking about Aset, and on her head is a chair, right? She's always got this little chair on her head. That represents the throne. And when she's sitting in a posture that represents the chair.
Mm-hmm.
So her lap is the throne
Mm.
because Heru, the child who's the king that's to rule the world, is doing what? Sitting on her lap. He's sitting on the throne. His mama, the feminine factor, is the throne and represents the power of earth existence. But Heru, like Asar, represents the authority because remember, they're the kings, they're
Mm-hmm.
ruled.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes the power of the feminine to give authority to the masculine. And the power and the authority governs existence with respect for one another's space and responsibility. So the child in that trinity is always the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The man is the past, because you remember he always dies. The woman is the present, and the child is the future. She's the present because she has to nurture the future. He's the past because he put the seed that created the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Professor, somebody in the chat is asking, is reincarnation a bad thing? Yeah.
Reincarnation is the only thing.
Mm.
It's the only thing, but you're not reincarnated. You are created. You're recreated.
You always got to come up with something new, man. You are say that again. You are
You're
recreated,
recreated. Yeah,
not reincarnated. You are recreated. Wow,
that's right.
I like that. I like
See,
that.
because we like to talk about sex and then call it love making and then treat it like it's the plague.
Mm.
Think about that again now. We talk about sex, we
Mm-hmm.
call it making love, it
Mm-hmm.
produces life, but we treat it like it's the plague when we have to discuss stuff.
Mm.
Well, if it wasn't for that penis having a relationship with that vagina and producing that egg and that sperm, life ends. In that collision, you become the creator. Creator up in the sky doing shit.
Mm-hmm.
Your penis and that vagina in collaboration as an extension of the feminine and the masculine becomes that aspect of the totality of divinity that we call the creator. So you're looking for something separate. Oludumare, Oshun, Allah. No, that's describing that thing you call making love and you call having sex that you scared to talk about. And its end game is the reproduction of the two instruments that are polar opposites coming together to recreate itself. That's the only way creation takes place. You didn't float down out of the sky in a basket, neither did I. Your child didn't float down out of a basket. It got created, recreated by you and your lady. And the only thing you can recreate is yourselves, because that's all you got to put in the pot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But each of those selves is made up of millions of grandparents, male and female, going back over millions of years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How
So
long do you think we've been on this planet, Professor? How long do you think we've been here?
I don't have the slightest idea, and nobody else does either,
Mm-hmm.
because we are made up of the same thing the planet's made up of. We made up of the same thing Mars is made up of, and Jupiter is made up of, and everything that exists is made up of. There's
Mm-hmm.
only one thing that exists, and we're nothing but an aspect of that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what Western science has done is faked everybody out with the notion of separation of things that have never been separated. You know, Western science view the world in a bunch of tiny little pieces trying to come together. African science view the world as one big piece that's trying to stay together. You understand that?
Yeah. Yes.
So
Totally different perspective.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're calling reincarnated really is recreated.
Mm-hmm.
We constantly recreate ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Where the mess comes in is we recreate our genetic self, which is jam-packed full of memories of all of the millions of years of our other selves. But unless we recreate and give rebirth our consciousness with each generation, you can't get the recreated self to recall all that wealth of knowledge that is stored in it.
Okay.
You see?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But consciousness isn't just having some information about history. Consciousness is the key to unlock your, what do you call it, celestial memory.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Because you remember when Mars was created. You remember when Jupiter was created. But you'll only remember if the consciousness, that configuration of worldview and ideas, unlock those cells in your body. That's why the Dogon can talk about Sirius B, a star that could only be seen by a telescope starting in the 1950s, 1,000 years ago. How did they know the star was there and was functioning in the way that they say it's functioned, which is exactly the way the telescope saw it functioning in recent time? Because they had a memory of the star when it was created, embedded in their DNA. You do too. Even the very word education, you know what the word education means?
What? Tell me.
Comes from to educate, bring something inside of you out. The Western world make you think education is putting something from outside of you in. And that's why it's a mess. No, education is bringing something that's already inside of you out. What the schools are supposed to do is give you the tools to do that with. But they make you think the tools to release education is education. And it's not the same thing. It's like saying dance is culture. No, it's not. Dance is a tool of culture. Music is culture. No, it's not. It's a tool of culture. Drama is not culture. It's a tool of culture. What are the tools supposed to do? Express the fundamental ideas that is the thing you call culture. And that allows it to become your primary education system. Right now, your education system is brainwashing and indoctrination by the lesser beings, the mutants of Earth. If something has mutated, it has depreciated. Depreciation means you've lost your essence. You are not a totality anymore. So how can the mutant teach the totality how to be total? Think about it now. I think your little brothers call that dropping science, right?
That's what it is, yeah.
So just think about it. I'm not trying to create nothing complex or nothing new. I'm just talking common sense. You know, common sense.
Yeah.
So when we come back to the Trinity, when the Europeans invade Kemet and Northeast Africa, they are coming out of their uncouth, uncultured barbarianism, where life is about killing and taking what you want without any accountability for the act of genocide that you've carried out that you call wars. And then they come among us and realize, wow, how did they build all those things? Where did they find the time to do it? How did they maintain that kind of peace and order over such a long period of time? So we need to learn to do that too, so we can stop murdering and killing and robbing and raping and plundering.
Right, right, right.
But they didn't have the capacity. They didn't have the psycho-spiritual capacity to contain the totality of the African sacred science, which we call spirituality. Again, they did not have the capacity to contain the totality of the African sacred science. So what they got was aspects from the periphery in terms of an understanding of the meaning of a thing. So in the Trinity, they don't cut out the mother. In the beginning, you have to have Mary to produce Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
What they did in the beginning, they cut out the father. And so that Joseph had nothing to do with it. His penis wasn't active in the process. Somehow the thing they were calling God was active. What they didn't tell you that Joseph and his penis was God.
Mm-hmm.
No, you said, you better think that through. People be beating you up, running you off the air. Accuse you of blasphemy. Think of it now.
Mm.
God's supposed to have given this woman Mary, who's supposed to be a virgin, notwithstanding she's got an older child named James, but she's still supposed to be a virgin. So the word virgin don't mean never having had sex, does it? It must mean something else. Okay. So all women is that Mary is symbolic of all women. All women is the Virgin Mother. Because without her, life ends. All men has to be the God aspect of the goddess Virgin Mother. Otherwise, life ends. And they produce always the savior of the world, the continuation of life. Okay. And that continuum is symbolized by the child.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, in the African Trinity, there isn't just one Holy Mother. When Geb and Nut mates, they create a Sar and a Set, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they create Seth and Nephthys. Because where else is Heru going to find a wife? Unless there's another couple to produce another child. So the
Right,
Africans started that shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't just have an Adam and Eve, they had two Adams and two Eves, two separate families. So you got a Sar and a Set, and you got Set and Nephthys. So now Nasar got somebody to have a baby with and keep the cycle going of recreating self. The body of knowledge that gets them there that we see from the beginning in the coffin text, where Amen, which represents the concept of that which is hidden, that which is unknowable, meaning in terms of source. But you call that process that comes out of the hidden source, Amen. And according to the dialogue our ancestors wrote down in the book that's called the Pyramid Text, he says, I create myself out of myself. I cause existence to exist so that existing might exist. And when I found myself existing, ma'at, truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, and reciprocity was already at my side. And I cough up tefnut shoot, and I spat out tefnut. That's the air, the moisture, and the gases that makes up the galaxy that produces all the planets. And they gave birth to Geb, meaning and that's the planet Earth and the immediate sky, what we call sky around the planet Earth, that ozone and those gases and minerals that make up us. Because we're nothing but a configuration of certain gases and minerals, certain elements. You know, matter of fact, the best way to describe us is to say we're just dirt. And people say, well, we don't eat dirt. No, but everything that you eat came into being out of dirt with
Dirt,
the
yeah.
assistance of sunlight and moisture, right? Every carrot you ate was a seed, but it absorbed that dirt, and that seed turned it into a carrot. Every kale you eat was a seed that absorbed that dirt, and that dirt was turned into kale leaves, etc., etc. Every piece of beef you eat, he ate that grass that came from dirt. So are you not dirt? Are you not the earth? The very earth you talk about that you pollute every day as you pollute yourself. If we were to give some deep study to understand, I think we have 47 primary minerals that make us up and 800 and something other minerals, lesser minerals that make up the human body. Yet the overwhelming majority of this big old thing sitting in front of you is 70-something% water, if not more. Extract all the water out of me, the minerals and dust that left, you can put it in the palm of your hand. Yet I weigh 290-something pounds.
Mm.
And if you let it dry, you can blow it away like dust.
Mm.
The rest of me is the electricity, the energy, the fire that's symbolized by that sun behind your head that makes all of the rest of this work.
You dropping some shit today, man. Come on, Professor. Come on, Professor. Come with it.
Talk about the Trinity, right?
Come with it, man. Come with it, Professor. I'm here. Good.
Time to tell people when we talk about we're priests of this and we're priests of this,
Yeah.
make sure you understand the science you're supposed to teach the people. Because the priest in ancient Africa was at first a scientist that governed certain realm. Just like that sun behind you, isn't it odd? Almost every time they have a sun, they have a moon, right? What's the relationship? Right now, I'm a sun. You're a moon. Why? Because I'm giving off light and you're reflecting that light. I'm giving off knowledge and you and your system is now reflecting that knowledge. So the others who you're reflecting the knowledge to, you have then become, though you're a moon to me, you've become a sun to them and they've become a moon to you.
It's amazing. Amazing.
You understand it?
Amazing.
Okay. And so that's why we got to study astronomy and learn about the universe. And see, we created, from the study of astronomy, the Africans created astrology to explain astronomy to the masses of people. But we think astronomy is some game. What's my sign? My sign is Jupiter versus Joppity Joppity Jop, and I'm a Libra. Oh, Libras did love than Taurus. Oh, but I'm a Scorpio. Oh, I so hate Scorpio, man. You know, and that's as far as we can go. Where the body of knowledge is not only sacred, but strategic to our very living success. So what is that body of knowledge? It's an understanding of cosmology. But cosmology, without understanding that you are the product of ecology, nature, that is fed by the light of cosmology, which is your sun and you are its reflected moon. If you don't get all of that straight, then we're going to have the confusion we have in the world today. Because, like everything I do comes down to basics. How do I supply food, clothing, shelter, safety, security for me, my mate, and our offsprings, and then our greater community that we're a part of? Because you can talk all this other esoteric shit, but if you can't apply that science, if you can't apply the knowledge of science, if you can't apply the understanding to being able to assure that you can supply food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security, all of this other stuff is crap and means nothing.
Mm.
And we must understand that in step, and I see Brother King Simon is on the case as he is always, in step, we must understand that we must get control, like Malcolm X says, of economic, politics, and culture
Mm.
where we live.
Speaking of economics, that's your cash app, right? I had it on here so long. I want to make sure I got the right cash app. I don't want them to send it to the
No,
wrong.
yes, sir. That's
That's
it. That
okay. All right.
cash
Yeah.
out, Dr. James. Thank you, brother.
Yeah. Thank
You
you,
want
King
it.
Sam.
You're one of the few, if not the only, brothers that do that. I'll be on
Um,
people's show and they just feel like, "Thank you, brother Small. Have a good night." You know,
nah,
I'm like, all right.
I'm gonna look out for you,
No,
Professor.
you always have, Rich. From very day one. You
Hey,
you always have.
you know what I want to ask you, Professor? Earlier, you talked about the Europeans' inability to comprehend
Yeah,
the science totally.
we talk about the mutants'
Okay.
inability to comprehend.
So check this out, Professor. I've watched so many lectures. I don't know. Read so many books.
Mm.
I've read or I've heard in different places before that we gave them, even if me and you had a show in the secret societies, we gave them the information, a certain level of it, because we
Mhm.
knew we were going to fall. So they had to be the custodians
No,
of the
that's not
information.
why we gave it to them. See, that's a myth,
So,
and I've never
so
said that. Others may say that.
okay,
I'm
talk to me
not
about
saying
that.
that. That sound. I'm not gonna call the names of those groups who like to say that. So yeah,
Okay,
we were supposed to go in slavery. Hell no.
did we know we was going to fall?
Yes, we knew we were gonna fall because we were up against something that was more vicious than we had ever thought anything on earth would or could be. And we knew we couldn't overcome it. We had bounced it back a number of times.
Yeah.
We gave them the information with the hope of neutralizing them by bringing some modicum of civilization to them. But it
Mm,
wasn't enough because they didn't have the capacity to retain. They had the capacity to retain some aspects, but they did not then, and do not now have the capacity. People say, well, how come they're ruling? By sheer genocide and ignorance. They've cut us off from the body of knowledge. So we're nothing but ignorant clone of his misinformation and misunderstanding. So it looks like he got it all going on because he'll blow your brains out if you try to get it. And you interpret that to say he's smart or he's strong. No, he is the same beast that breached our borders at the first encounter. He just dressed better now because we gave him enough information to dress himself. He smells better because we gave him soap to wash himself. He can read and write because we taught him language. But what we couldn't teach him is the restoration of the capacity to comprehend the essence of divinity itself. So he's at war against God. He's at war against the divine. And that's why he's at war against nature. That's what pollution is about. Pollution is about war against nature. That's what damaging the ozone about. That's war against nature. That's what's damaging the rivers. That's war against nature. That's what's poisoning the soil. That's war against nature. And guess what? The African represents the essence and the core of nature. And that's why he's at war against us. Because we're the only thing that can kill the beast, but we can't kill the beast unless we become other than the beast. And that means to restore our own sacred science integrity as the ruling body of information that governs the environment and the ecology we find ourselves in. And did that make sense?
definitely, definitely.
Okay.
To touch on this Holy Trinity concept,
Mhm.
can a man really be a man without giving birth to a child? Can a woman really be a woman? Well, I know that, where obviously you can still be a man and woman, but can you truly experience that godhood without giving birth to a child, Professor? Because that's the completion of the Holy Trinity. And if you don't
Yeah,
have that, you haven't completed it yet.
no. See, that's why you got to be careful how
Mhm,
the beasts design things,
mhm, mhm,
especially in this gender confusion that much
mhm,
of their community and trying to get most of our community into. And so, if a man, because of some malformation of his sperm production, given the poisons we eat and the poisons we ingest and the poisons even our mother ingests before they give birth to us. Say, I can't produce the sperm, or the woman can't produce the egg that can give genetic birth. But we've got thousands of children who lost their mother, lost their father, who you can adopt. The power of your mind and your spirit can alter the DNA of anyone, especially a child. So that you can alter that DNA so that child, which did not come genetically from you, can become you. Let me say that again, because people see we don't be dwelling on stuff. Say, I'm a father, but I can't have any children. Something happened, my sperm ain't doing what it's supposed to do. But I want a child. So me and my mate, we adopt a child. My mind's energy, my words vibration, my spiritual intentions can transform the DNA of that child such that that child is a reflection of my DNA. Thus, that child has become my genetic child.
When you said that again, it was 1,000 times. I see why you repeated yourself. It hit me hard that second time you said it. It hit me hard. Go ahead. All right.
So that's
Yeah.
why we've got to study
Yes, sir.
Africa, and we can't play with it. See, we're reading a lot of books written by Black folks who did their research on books written by white folks who didn't understand and didn't have the capacity to be African. We're going to have to switch who we study under. And we, even though we may get some things from the surface level, from the mutants, that's useful, we've got to go in depth into African systems like Ifa, Voodoo, Akan, Zulu, Obi, Ipi, Igbo, Kikuyu. We need to go into those deep systems, right? Most of which don't have written literature. But the oral literature is more accurate than the written literature. Let me show you. And we do have written literature, we just don't understand the science. In Africa, especially in the Akan tradition, they have a drum they call the talking drum. They have multiple drums that do multiple things, but they have a drum called the talking drum. To play the talking drum, you must study for 40 years before you can play in public. What the talking drum does when a master is playing it is replicate the language at such a vibratory rate that you can hear the language in the same way if it's spoken by the tongue of another human being. That's some deep shit. But it's deeper than that. What those drums also do, those master drummers do, they must learn what do you call it? A song or what they're learning. That song they're learning is a replication of the history of the people. So I may be one drum, and my job is to maintain in that system the musical. I'm trying to find the word that is the history. Maybe my job is to maintain 1,000 years or 2,000 years. Now I must commit that to my memory. If I get one note wrong, that's how sacred the history is. If I fuck up one note, it could cost me my life. So oral history, especially that which is maintained in the drum culture, is more accurate than any written history, which is based on somebody's belief and feelings. A good book on this, you have to find it in French. And it's written by Ngora Bura, or Bura. He's an ancestor now out of Cote d'Ivoire. And he wrote a book called Drumology. And he gets deep into the sacred science, you know. And then you realize, oh my God, we didn't lose anything with colonialism coming or slavery. What we've done, we've hid it. But the enslavers and the colonizers have screwed us up so badly, we don't even want to look in the cupboards of our ancestors' mind to find what was hidden.
Mm.
That's still there
Mm-hmm.
for us to find. It's
Mm-hmm.
hidden in our dance movements. It's hidden in our dance rhythm. It's
Mm-hmm.
hidden in the patterns we put on the cloth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's hidden in the language and the way we speak it and how it vibrates. Our historical celestial truth, going back to when the universe existed before we became human, is still all preserved in our culture. What the European have managed to do is to bamboozle you to forget yesterday and think only of his confused today. Forget yesterday, think of his confused today, and he got you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but we need to get back to yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
You know, speaking of yesterday, a lot of people feel as though, you know, talking about this Holy Trinity, they feel as though yesterday was a lot easier to create a Holy Trinity, and today it's real hard. Women feel like there ain't enough men. Men feel like all the women ain't you know, there's no good woman. So this concept seems real difficult, and people are completely passing by it. Although this is the foundation, people
well,
aren't even, you know,
a
yeah.
lot of people is, but a lot of people are still getting married and having them babies. We need to talk about them
Talk
too,
about that. Okay, yeah,
and
yeah.
they're the majority.
Mm-hmm.
We always talk about the minority because the minority is screaming louder than the majority.
Mm-hmm.
The majority is quiet and comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
The minority is noisy and uncomfortable. So we pay attention to them, you know, and we don't pay it. It's like talking about the kid on the street who's on drugs, who's shooting somebody, who's robbing somebody, who's going to prison and coming back out and doing the same thing all over again. But we don't talk about the kids who graduated from the All Boys Academy in Chicago, and 100% of them have been going to college every year for the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about the kid who went to college and got a degree, came out of the same so-called ghetto as the one
Mm-hmm.
who stuck up the bank
Mm-hmm.
and came back home and set up his profession or got work, and he takes care of his mama and his daddy and his grannies. And he give guidance to the community and help other young people. We don't talk about them. Yet they're the majority of our community, not the minority.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be careful about what we talk about.
Mm-hmm. Got you.
Yeah.
Got
Because you can get so busy banging your head in a dark closet and not realize if you open the door, the living room is full of light,
you. Mm-hmm.
you know, because you're
Indeed.
banging around in the dark closet.
Mm-hmm.
Open the door and see the living room is lit up,
It's lit up. Yeah.
you know.
Let's take a couple of questions, Professor. How you feel about that? You want to take a couple of
No,
questions?
no, that's cool.
Let's
That's
take it.
good.
Before we do, family, if you would like to support this channel, my cash app at the bottom, $ Black Magic 363. If you want to support Professor James Small, $ Dr. James Small. So yeah, definitely show love to those who show love to you. All right, family. And with that being said, we're gonna get to a couple of Q&A before we get out of here. All right. Let's see what's going on in the chat room right now. They've been real active. Haven't been able to keep up, but y'all been real active. Um, hmm. Somebody says, "What? Where's this at?" I just seen the question. The chat is moving so fast.
Mm.
Um, damn, I just seen this question. Give me a second, Professor.
Take your time, brother. Take your time.
Okay, what books can we read to research the symbols and the way Africans use them?
Oh God. The first one, I gotta look at myself. Let me just see. I need to get a bunch of stuff down. Um, You know, I always tell people, read John Mbiti. John Mbiti. What is John Mbiti? Mbiti. He's a Kenyan, and he wrote a book called African Religion and Philosophy. It should be a must-read if you want to begin to understand it. And then there's the most recent piece, and I just had it in my hand. It's called Rebirthing African Consciousness. And where is it? Rebirthing African Consciousness. Yeah. So, Rebirthing African Consciousness. His name is so long, I got to put it on the screen so you can see it. This is an important new book, right? Absolutely important new book that must be a part of the read. And Mbiti will give you foundation, and then this book. And there's some smaller ones that I want to get, because if you don't get foundation, you're not going to do the other stuff. And the Island of Meme. This book, The Island of Meme. The Island of Meme is by Dr. Wade Nobles. And you got to get this book in your library. See, The Island of Meme, Dr. Wade Nobles. Another one of the must-read, because there's no easy route to this. But The Island of Meme and Rebirthing African Consciousness, Rebirthing the African Consciousness. And then if you want to get into the Dogon to understand how the mind is working with the universe, is Conversation with Ogata Meli. Conversation with Ogata Meli. This is an old elder who gives an oral history review to Marcel Grulot, and he wrote it down. This is the religious ideas of the Dogon. And so if you just, that's enough literature, but there was one other I wanted to find, it was about the symbols. But if you understand this, you understand symbols, because everything is about, how do I take an object out of nature? Remember when the hieroglyph is being written, or the Medu Neter is being written, 90% of the population is illiterate. They don't read, they don't write. But there's that handful who was given responsibility by the larger population to master these things so that they can help the masses. And the masses that will provide you with the house, the food, the clothing, the shelter, all the things you need to have a good life. Then you provide us with that knowledge so we can then have a good life. You understand? And so they had to figure out, then how do I give the story, all the stuff I'm learning about astronomy, all the stuff I'm learning about agronomy, all the stuff I'm learning about biology, all the stuff I'm learning that we learn about in ancient Kemet, how do I tell this to the masses? They created a language system called Medu Neter. How did they create a language system? They look at nature and say, let's take bugs and birds and plants and other animals out of nature, which people understand how they function, and use them to symbolize how the mind should function and understand nature. And so all of a sudden then, the illiterate have become totally literate without even being able to read and write as we know reading and writing today. And these symbols, they're chosen based on the representation of concepts, ideas, and principles that are active in nature and the universe. And it is these concepts, ideas, and principles that make up the sacred science that people want to call religion. The thing you call religion is actually the tooling for explaining your spirituality and for maintaining its continuity. They're really not separate things, you know? It's like having a dance number that's talking about a bird dancing on water, right? So the dance's purpose then would be to tell a story with body movement about this bird that danced on water, right? So the culture, the tool in the culture we call dance, now become an instrument for the interpretation of things in nature that helps explain the natural culture to the human being. So all symbols are used that way. Even if you're dealing with Haiti, and let me see if I can get a copy of one of the bebes. You know, you see those symbols on there that we call bebes?
Yeah.
Okay. These symbols here, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and those symbols are derived from the mind of the Africans in Haiti to explain cosmic energy vibration that is the result of a particular activity in nature and in the human being. So when we study, but the first thing we know, you can't get to level 12 unless you master 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Getting back to them secret societies we were talking about, that's why they gave out knowledge in degrees. Master degree 1, then we'll give you degree 2. Because if I give you degree 3 and you haven't mastered 1 and 2, you'll become a quack. You understand? Somebody who look like you're practicing truth, but you don't have the foundation of truth. You just have information about truth. You see? And so those books I showed you, those are foundational books. And especially the Island of Meme.
Mm-hmm.
The Island of Meme, written by Dr. Wade Nobles, and it's the subtitle is Haiti's Unfinished Revolution. But that's a bit deceptive. That's why you got to really read it.
Mm-hmm.
What it's saying that the Haitian Revolution is unfinished because the Haitian Revolution was about a mind transformation process that got interrupted with the death of Dessalines.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a mind process on how you perceive the European mimetic infection, which we call his culture, his religion, and his belief, that has poisoned your system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you cleanse yourself of that poison and reconstruct your African meme such that you reorganize yourself so that you become one with the universe again? That's what the Heru, the child sitting on Aset lap, represents. Remember, Heru becomes the savior of the world. Heru, out of the word hero, comes from.
From
He
here, yeah.
becomes the son of God. He becomes the sun itself. There's no way you can imagine life on earth without the sun. So the Africans weren't too far off by saying, yo, check this out.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have this, your ass don't exist. Okay? As simple as that. But guess where the greatest sun in the world exists? Right where you're sitting right now. You look exactly like the Christ right now, where your head is sitting. The greatest sun, the greatest light that will give guidance to the world is the mind of the human being.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest light that will give direction to the world is the mind of the human being. It was Stephen Biko, a young South African that was murdered by the apartheid mutants in South Africa, that said, the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressors is the mind of the oppressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
The greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So as long as our mind is in his hands, he runs the public school system. He determined the curricula. He determined what a degree means. He determined what school give the best degrees and the Ivy League and the this league. Then your mind is in the hands of the oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
But when you pursue another educational track, when you pursue another body of knowledge to explain reality to you, you're freeing your mind from the hands of the oppressor. And Dr. Asa Hilliard told us that true freedom, and the word freedom comes from the Greek word free to liberate and dome, mind. So the word freedom means liberated mind. So we need, but most people, when they say freedom, they don't think of liberated mind. They think of, can I go to the grocery store? Can I spend my money here? Do I have the freedom to go and do this thing or that thing? No. Freedom means a liberated mind, a mind that determines its own destiny. Dr. Noble said power is the ability to define your reality and have others accept your definition of that as if it were their own. So that's why Asa Hilliard told us that true freedom means to be shackled to your identity. So if you can't get your identity straight, you're going to be the ADOS and the foundation of this and the Aborigine this and the Afro this. You can't get your identity together as a people. How can you get your power together? So it comes back to fundamental and basic. Can I provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security? Can I control the economic, politics, and culture that would allow me to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security? Could I be in charge of the land, labor, and resources that allow me to control the economic, politics, and culture? I can do all those things if I know myself. And I can know myself if I study my history and erase the enemy's mystery.
Indeed. Let me get to this last question before we get out of here, Professor. They want to know, should we exhaust just as much energy researching our American Indian lineage as we are our African lineage?
Very few of
If
us have any Indian lineage, and we ought to stop playing that little Indian lineage game. You know, we need to first, if you really search your African lineage, you'll know the answer to this question. We talk about this Indian lineage because we're still running away from being African. What Indian lineage are you talking about?
So you don't think we were here in the Americas first?
No, that's not what the question's asked. I don't confuse things.
Uh,
We were everywhere first. We were in Europe first. We
uh,
were in China first.
uh,
Do we argue those questions?
uh,
No,
uh,
because we're playing a little game with the Indian lineage.
uh,
You're talking about the Asiatics, who the white people call Indians. We were at war with them for 10,000 years before the cracker got here. So what are you talking about? Yes, some of us amalgamated, but that's not as much of a lineage to be wasting your time on. You need to find out who were the Africans that were here. That's not what you're talking about because you ain't got no information on that. You just got a supposition on that. Get some information. Read,
What's the supposition? School me real quick. You said a supposition?
yeah, meaning we just supposing we were here.
Oh, okay, okay,
We
okay.
ain't got no proof to prove
Right,
that
right,
we
right.
were here.
Okay.
So we make reference to pyramids that don't exist in the middle of Mississippi Valley or some shit like that. So there are some pyramids here in North America. I've been to them, both in Mississippi. I've been to them in Illinois. We see them all through Central America. So we know we've been here.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not confuse the Africans with the Asiatic who came and declared war on us 10,000 years before the white man came. Let's tell that story. Then we can have a conversation. Because we were everywhere first before anybody else got there, because we were the only somebody else when people started moving to everywhere else. So study anthropology, study paleontology, learn how we moved up out of Africa into the people of the rest of the world before we mutated into the Eurasian and came back onto the world. And that one you call an Indian is the same Eurasian that came out of Siberia and parts of Asia. And the first person they went to war with was us when they got here. So I'm not going to glorify that we managed to marry into some of those nations.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us who were here when the European got here was put enslaved on the same plantation with those who came off the slave ship, and we amalgamated with them.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to read LaRon Bennett, called Shaping a Black America. Mine's a little ragged around the edge, And there's a chapter in there called The Red and the Black. Read that chapter. And, Ram is a beautiful historian. He's an ancestor now. And you will find out that the people were trying to deal with this. Read Ivan Van Sertima. Ivan Van Sertima was the product of Africans and Native Americans. I'm a product of Africans and Native Americans. And when I said Native Americans, I'm not talking about the Asiatics. I'm talking about the Africans who were here before the Asiatic came 10,000, 11,000 years ago. So if we want to deal with that, let's take the question right. So go and do the research on David Imhotep's book, The First Americans Were Black.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Jewish guy. He wrote a very good, well-researched piece. I forgot his name, and his book is here. But if you go to David Imhotep's book, David have over 200 or 300 sources. His bibliography is almost as big as the book. So go to buy David Imhotep's book, The First Americans Were Black, or The First Americans Were Africans. We were the first everywhere. We were the first in China. First Chinese were black. The first Japanese were black. The first Australians were black. The first Frenchmen were black. The first people living in what is Britain was black. The first people living in Russia were black. So it's nothing new. If we're going to be everywhere else in the world, why not in North America? What's the big mystery? Except for those still playing the escapism game. I don't want to be African because that's too big a load to carry right now. Because that fight is too big for me to take on against the devil right now. Well, I'm taking on the devil. All right, right now, front and center. I'm an African. Period. I own the world. Better than that, I am the damn universe. Nothing gets right unless you go to black. And all these shades of browns that some people are trying to glorify, including my shade of brown, ain't nothing but a shade of black. So we need to get to the source.
I hear you, Professor. Leave your contact information for the people who want to reach you and get in contact with you, my
yes, brother. ProfessorSmallAfricanWorld.com. ProfessorSmallAfricanWorld.com. Facebook is James Small, but there's a bunch of James Small. So you got to look for my picture, my ugly face. Then you got the right James Small. But ProfessorSmallAfricanWorld.com, that's my Facebook page. You can get to me like that.
Mm-hmm. I got an idea for a future show. I'm going to holler at you probably tomorrow about it, Professor, all right? But I definitely want to get you on here sooner than later. And I'm just
let's close out by coming back to this divine mother.
Indeed. Yes.
Dr. Ben used to tell us heaven was between the leg of a black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And people used to get upset. Show me a black man who don't believe that. We all know that's where heaven is at. And we all know people say, well, where you come from? We come from heaven. Yeah. All black men came from between the legs of a black woman. You didn't drop out the sky and you didn't grow out the ground. Tell yourself the truth because it is the truth that you can see as the truth. And then you'll be getting down to the bottom of this thing. We are God having a human experience. We are an expression of an aspect of the divine essence having this human experience. God is the totality of creation itself. And we are just an aspect of that totality. Yet, any aspect of a thing contain the total possibility of the same thing. We've allowed somebody to take us away from our sacred science truth. Those books I made reference to, and especially this one, Rebirthing African Consciousness, will shake you up and put you back on the path to freedom. Freedom is what? Being shackled to your African identity. You want to get shackled to the Native Americans? Shackle on.
No, you said freedom is liberating the mind.
No, the word freedom means to liberate the mind.
Okay, yeah. See,
but true freedom means to be shackled to your identity because your identity is your mind.
See, you ain't think I remember that.
They'll get it. Identity is your mind. You see? because your mind is an expression, or your mind is the totality of all of the experience of your existence since the first human being began.
Mm-hmm.
All of the experience of your existence since the first human being began comes to your mind, because each of us, me, Rich, we got the same original mother.
Mm. Ain't
And
that
you
something?
have the totality of her embedded in you, and I have the totality of her embedded in me all these millions of years later.
Mm-hmm.
And the white man has been slick. He's cut you off from an understanding of that. He got you worshiping dead people. And just I told you before in here, the Jesus piece. Put your head back in the sun for a minute and imagine 12 dudes sitting around you. And there you are at the Last Supper, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
And
sir.
you got 12 dudes, each of them in 4 clusters of 3. That's the 4 seasons
Mm.
and 12 months evolving around the sun. It's an explanation of a solar drama.
Mm-hmm.
Sacred science being taught to ignorant Europeans who didn't have a clue. That's all.
Mm.
It gets deeper than that. Because when you break down the whole story of Christ, it's trying to tell you what the power of love is.
Mm-hmm.
But love comes as a result of knowing thyself. How can you love what you don't know?
Mm-hmm.
You understand? When you see people out here killing each other, they're killing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You can kill another person because you don't have no love for them. And if you can't have a love for the other person, it means you have no love for yourself. If you love yourself, you see yourself as the other person. That's the way nature's love works. And so we got a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Much of this isn't far away from our consciousness. Most of us is right there.
Mm-hmm.
But we just need to move the scab off of our eyes and our minds.
Mm-hmm.
There's one other book that I wanted to bring. Let me see if I have it. I don't know if you've heard of a brother named Baba Fukiai Benseki.
Mm-mm.
Benseki Fukiai.
Mm-mm.
Benseki Fukiai. No, I just had him in my hand. Right. And this book, I beg the people, get this book too. It's called African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, Principles of Life and Living. African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, Principles of Life and Living. And it's by our brother, let me see if I can get his name up there. You just have to say Fukiai, Fukiau, Dr. Fukiai. Kai Ben Nantu Fukiai. It sounds like a Japanese name, but it's a Congolese name. But all you got to do is ask for the title. African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo.